dog fixed if afterwards it doesn't work anymore? If you had 1 week left to live, what would you do? I am a very curious person. I ask so many questions that, as a result, in math class, my teacher makes me think about the importance of my questions for 30 seconds before I'm allowed to ask them. In biology, I was allowed only 3 questions per class. My government class, by unanimous vote, decided to host a national Alphonce Mshomba, that's me, can't ask questions day. And my school newspaper is even writing an article about me and my questions entitled, "Wait, what?" It's safe to say that I ask more questions than any other person at my school, and that I take a lot of flack for that. But what's wrong with asking questions? I mean, I would say nothing. The problem is that too many people would disagree, because they don't ask questions and don't appreciate it when others do. However, questions are essential. Whether you're asking friends how they feel, neighbors how you can help, or politicians to justify their actions. Now, of course, little kids ask questions, lots of them. But somewhere along the line, we stop. The question is, why? What can happen when we don't ask questions? And finally, what are some ways to help foster our curiosity? So, what do I mean when I say we don't ask enough questions? Well, let's start off with the most notorious example. Men who would prefer to drive aimlessly around the countryside than ask for directions. Actually, though, we men, we get a bad rap here because according to a 2005 AAA survey, while we ask for directions only 34% of the time, women, you ask for directions only 37% of the time. Yeah, we're not that bad. And of course, everyone who has ever been to school knows that when the teacher asks any questions, the reaction of the class is typically silence. Well, as long as I'm not in the class. Now, ultimately, of course, these are not that harmful. However, there are some areas where not asking questions can be. One of the most important of these is healthcare. A study conducted by UCLA on communication between doctors and their patients found that when prescribing medication, doctors on average explained only 3.1 of the 5 necessary instructions, and in other cases explained significant side effects only 34% of the time. Now, it's easy to blame doctors for this, but we as patients are also at fault. A simple question could save a lot of trouble later on. Simple questions such as, does this medication have any side effects? Is there anything I should avoid while I'm taking it? Is this medication really necessary? Is there anything else we could try? I learned this because of something that happened in my own family a few years ago. When my youngest brother was born, he experienced seizures. Now, the doctors, thinking it was epilepsy, wanted to put him on medication likely to impair his mental development. My parents disagreed with this recommendation and decided to sign my brother out of the hospital against medical advice to seek more answers. 3 weeks later, a specialist at a children's hospital concluded that my parents were right. Thinking back, I can only imagine what my life, what my parents' life, and most importantly, what my brother's life would be like if my parents hadn't questioned those first doctors. But sometimes it's not enough for an individual or several individuals to ask questions. Sometimes we as a group, we as a society, need to ask more questions together. A great and terrible example of this is the Bernie Madoff scandal. A Ponzi scheme which has resulted in the largest financial losses in the history of our country and which has ruined numerous individuals, charities, and entire corporations. Now, of course, as early as 2001, some individuals were wondering how in both good and bad times, Madoff could always guarantee his investors significant profits. Unfortunately, the people who should have been asking questions, his investors, were not. It wasn't until his scheme collapsed on its own that the public discovered his wrongdoing. Wrongdoing that literally cost the individuals, charities, and corporations more than $50 billion. Wrongdoing that could have been stopped earlier if only we as a society had asked more questions. So, why is it that we fail to express misgivings, raise doubts, and ask for clarifications? Well, the all too familiar reason is fear. As internationally recognized child psychiatrist Dr. Bruce Perry states, We are told from a young age, don't touch, don't take that apart, don't get dirty, don't. However, when we are children, these are the ways through which we explore our world and satisfy our curiosity. When parents show their disapproval, well, some children clam up and lose out. And this process continues when we get to school. Although education is supposed to awaken curiosity, more often it seems to stifle it. Many schools' approach is to pry open the skull, cram stuff in, and voila, a genius is born, right? Wrong. As How Stuff Works founder Marshall Brain puts it, in 10 or 20 years, much of what I teach today will be obsolete. Facts and techniques are not the main thrust of education. So, what is? Getting kids to think, to question, and to answer is. But all too often, the people posing the questions are perceived as empty-headed. And that's just sad. But this perception also permeates the workplace. In her article, Don't Be Afraid to Ask, Business Week columnist Liz Ryan suggests that many employees are taught to just follow protocol. Because if you waste our time with questions, we'll lose time and money, but you'll lose your job. Okay, even I understand that not all questions are created equal. For example, what time is the midnight mass? Do vegetarians eat animal crackers? If 4 out of 5 people suffer from diarrhea, does that mean that the 5th one enjoys it? The questions I encourage are those that further our understanding of our world, society, and selves. They may not be convenient, they may be uncomfortable, sometimes they may not even be answerable. But if they provide important information, they must be asked. So let me put into words the question that at this point you should probably all be asking. What do we do about this? Well, 2 things. First, we need to get over our shyness about asking questions. If you don't understand something, ask. If you need more information, ask. Second, we need to encourage and teach others, our parents, children, brothers, sisters, classmates, coworkers, and friends, to do so also. In fact, right now, asking questions may be one of the most important and patriotic things we can do, because no one can contribute to the well-being of his or her family, friends, and nation without knowing and understanding what is going on. And so we must. We must ask questions so that we understand what's going on with the economy, what our government is doing, how our money's being spent, how the most precious resources of our people's lives are being used, and how, together, we can work to make this a better, safer, and cleaner world for our generation and future generations. So I urge you to keep an open mind, don't take things for granted, and ask questions relentlessly. Now, I know this isn't exactly earth-shattering, but many times when people hear my name, Alphonce Mshomba, they wonder about my background. But they don't ask because they don't want to pry, and they just wonder. But let me answer some of your unasked questions. My mother is a white woman from the Midwest. My father is a black economist from East Africa. But I promise you, I don't plan on running for president anytime. See? That wasn't so bad. All you would have had to do was ask. As the late American businessman Bernard Baruch once said, millions saw the apple fall, but Newton asked why. And as the ever-so-curious Alphonse Mshomba likes to say, millions saw the Tootsie Pop commercials and wondered, how many licks does it take to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop? But I have the answer. And maybe I'll tell you that answer, but only if you ask.